Hi, I'm Marylise, and I'm here to talk to you about an exciting product we released last week called the Baseten Frontier Gateway. And I have with me today Bola, who is the brain behind the product.
Oh no.
And I'm really excited to kind of be quizzing him on, all the technology and why we built this, because I think it's going to be really exciting for our audience to hear about it. So at Baseten, I lead product marketing and the program development for this Frontier Gateway product that is aimed at model labs. And so, Bola, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Bola. I lead a product engineering team focused on building products specifically for labs and people training the next generation of frontier models.
Awesome. Great. So in the blog we issued last week, when we released the product, we talked about the capability silhouette, the concept of the jagged frontier. Can you expand on this and kind of talk to us about this concept?
Yeah. So essentially, I think, the predominant narrative last year has been this notion of a frontier model, that people are competing to have the frontier model. And the definition of the frontier model is that it would be a model that's good at everything, like any task that you throw at it. Like this notion of artificial general intelligence means that you could take a single model, make it the best at most tasks, and that's the thing that people will want. And that is, for the most part, true, until you start finding, specific tasks or specific kinds of problems that this model kind of wasn't trained on and isn't generally like very good at. So you can think about it like, I don't know if you've ever taken like a personality test or something, but like they sometimes have like these different vectors of how much are you on a scale of 1 to 10 on like these 7 or 8 different things. And then they plot it on like, okay, you're like a 5 here, but a 10 here and a 3 here. And like, the assumption of a frontier model is like, you're going to have kind of a circle. It's like, it will be good at everything like kind of equally as it gets better. But what we've noticed is like, if I'm looking at a model for coding ability and also looking at the model for medical knowledge or kind of like diagnosis of disease, right? It's like, it could be very good at coding, but that doesn't mean that like it could get a 10 on coding, but it could get like a 3 or 4. The same model will get a 3 or 4. And that's kind of what creates this jaggedness, like this notion of, because a model is so good at a specific task, doesn't mean that it will be very good at all other tasks. And that's where you get the silhouette is kind of this visual of like, well, how good is it at these different tasks? That will show you where the gaps are. And what's happening is that people are noticing these gaps and they're creating models specifically tailored at these kinds of problems. So different labs are coming up and applying their own techniques to essentially smooth out this jagged frontier, or to essentially compete for the many frontiers that actually exist. It's not just a single frontier, as was thought, like I think last year, when people were thinking about, there'll be these big models that will take all of the inference.
Right. Yeah, and exactly. And I think that's what we were seeing in the past. There were like 2 big labs basically out there, and then what we've seen is like hundreds of them like coming out, in the past 6 months, maybe to a year. And so why now? Like, why is this happening?
Yeah, I feel like this is all maybe like some of the ripple effects of DeepSeek. So I don't know if you remember, most people, I think when they think of DeepSeek, they think of like, oh, NVIDIA stock just tanked. And I think when it did recover, like thankfully for people. But I think what happened when DeepSeek launched is that there were 2 big stories. Like I think the first story was, hey, open source is kind of getting good enough to closed source. And like we kind of saw that play out over last year, where you have these very large models launching as open source models and really becoming competitive with closed source models on the capabilities. That was the first story. But that's not what tanked NVIDIA stock. Like that's fine. I think what ended up tanking NVIDIA stock is the story around the cost of training has truly gone down. And it's a bit more nuanced than that. Like it's not that the price of training went down in producing DeepSeek. That may or may not be true, but that's not what created this wave of models that we're going through. What actually happened is that like it ended up being that like post-training the model can get you to close the gap on any one of these tasks that the general model wasn't able to reach. Mm-hmm. And that is actually much, much, much cheaper than training a model from scratch. And as many open source models came out at the last year in many different like shapes and sizes. People took them and essentially like trained them to be the best at specific kind of tasks. And that's what kind of led to, what we think of as a Cambrian explosion of like new models and new labs across all different modalities, like using all different training techniques. I think that's like one part of it. The other part of it is, like people who were working at the big labs, like whether it's OpenAI or Anthropic or DeepMind, right? Like ended up leaving and starting their own companies. And you have like essentially like this talent diffusion out of labs into the market that's also training models and like really wants to bring a differentiated opinion on like how we build the best model for specific tasks. And we see that also leading to this wave of new models. And I think like the reality is like all these people want to really like build businesses on top of it. Like it's not just the model. So like I'm curious from your perspective, like as someone who, does like marketing and go-to-market things, like what would a lab need on top of their model to essentially build a business on top of it as well?
It's exciting. It's really exciting. I think, this just for me, like seeing all these businesses being created out of like something new so quickly, and that's really cool. But like all these companies and these labs, they're really good at like research and building those models you talked about, like to be very narrow in the subject area that they focus on. But they also just need to learn to go to market, and they want to monetize. And so the thing they are looking for, and that's why they're also looking at partnering with Baseten, because we have like, a pretty well-known brand now, and we have a lot of reach. They want like us to support their launch. And so we are partnering with them with like, social media amplification. We're doing programs together. Some of them we're going to be running demand generation campaign for potential end customers wanting to build an application. So we have like a whole kind of like menu of options, like we can work with them to really like take them to the next level. So, it can take the form of events, going together at this kind of things, and like, doing thought leadership conversations. We are not lacking ideas. There's a lot of things we can do with them. And so far, they have been like super willing to just do a lot of different things with us. And so it's just really exciting to see this kind of like new market kind of exploding with us. So, great. So, it's just really interesting to see that we are kind of like going into this new opportunity. But I have to think that there were products to do this before. Gateway is not new. Like, there were gateways out there. And so, so why isn't it working for those model labs? Like, why is it different?
Yeah, I think gateway is, just it's a word that means like something that leads you to something else, right? And I think the thing that it's leading you in this case is inference. Like at Baseten, we always say like...
inference is everything. I'm sorry, I cut you.
Like inference is everything. Additionally, like all roads lead to inference. Like at the end of the day, if you're creating a model, like what you want is for it to enable a novel outcome. And the way it does that is through inference. Like it doesn't stop at training. So the gateway leads you to inference. And when the gateway is decoupled from inference, and like at Baseten, we're working on giving you like the most performant inference through our dedicated infrastructure and through the Baseten inference stack. But when the gateway runs outside of it, you can lose all of that performance in just routing to this model or any other kinds of inefficiencies. Or the implementations of these gateways like can break at different scales. And like what you want is a gateway that is native to inference that scales with your inference. And it's really like a core piece of infrastructure. Like it's something, like my definition of infrastructure is like, it's something that you have to do, that if you do well, doesn't really make you better at what you do. But if you do poorly, it like really hurts you.
Yeah.
And I think like we want to take on these infrastructure problems so that people can focus on the things that will help them differentiate in their own businesses. Yeah. Like I think like Jeff Bezos maybe like in early like Amazon days had this notion of like everyone needs to focus on like what makes their beer taste better, and like doing the gateway really well just like won't make your model any better. but doing it really poorly can really get in the way of showcasing how good your model is for the applications that you want to unlock. And for us, like we want to take on these infrastructure problems and solve them in the context of inference so that people can just focus on building their models and building the products around the models.
Cool. Yeah, and at the end of the day, I mean, Baseten is like 6+ years old, and like we spent all this time building the infrastructure. So, you know, it's just not an easy task and not something that can be done in a few months. And so, totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to like simply define like what the gateway does, like the gateway takes like a dedicated inference deployment, which is assumed to like you essentially only one person can consume it, which is the person that deploys it. And, you know, you put the gateway on top of it, and now it allows you to serve that to multiple people. Like it gives you a multi-tenant API, and it lets you plug in multiple models behind it. So you can give multiple people access to multiple models through the gateway, and you could set, you know, rate limits, you could set usage limits, you get all the usage so that you can bill your customers directly. You can set your brand in the API so that you kind of like can build a brand around your model, which is important as you bring a new model to market or start up a new lab.
Very cool. So it's basically like a white label Baseten at the end of the day.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, I think of it as like, okay, like Baseten today solves your inference problems. And then there's this missing layer that you need to serve an API like the Anthropic API or like the OpenAI API. And like, this is that layer that gives you that full stack so that you can be like a full stack lab on top of Baseten without having to rebuild all that infrastructure.
Perfect.
Yeah, and it's actually like super exciting for us. Like the first lab that we worked with has actually like, they're not a new lab. Like they've been training coding models for a while, but I'm curious if you could tell us more about like Poolside and you know, what they got out of using Baseten and you know, what they got out of using the gateway specifically.
Yeah. So Poolside has been just an incredible customer for us, and I've had so much fun working with them. So basically they came to us, you know, just 7 weeks ago, and they were like, you know, nearly done training their model, and they wanted to go to market. And then they're just like facing this kind of like question of like, okay, what do we do from an infrastructure perspective? So they really wanted to go from, you know, what they had done in the past, which was like serving their model on-prem, you know, to a specific customer, to now serving it to like thousands of developers. And so they needed to have the infrastructure to reach the scale that they wanted. And so they turned to us and it basically asked us like if we could provide them with an API and like the infrastructure behind it to serve this model. So that's what they came. Our team kind of hustled and did an incredible job to kind of get it going for them like in 7 weeks, as I just mentioned. And they launched the model last week. So they launched like a closed version of their model called the Laguna M, and then an open source version for people to kind of like seed the market and kind of play with it a little bit. And everything went like so smoothly, and the performance were just incredible. So they have been all around like super happy, and we've been able to really like serve their use case perfectly. I think they were like the actual perfect customer for the gateway. Yeah. So with that, you know, okay, we're introducing this gateway. This is not inference, it's a gateway. And so Baseten has historically been known as an inference provider. So how do you think this new product expansion kind of like, what does it mean for Baseten?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some sense, like nothing changes. Like inference is everything. This is just another layer of the everything. Like as I mentioned before, like the goal is really as a lab, you could focus on what makes you different and not have to worry about all these layers of infrastructure that you don't have to solve for.
Yeah.
So we took on the pains of solving that infrastructure so people could really focus on building the models and differentiating on the research and monetizing that research and really building a business with their models instead of worrying about building technology that, you know, other people have built or can kind of invest a lot of their time building for them as they scale. Like I think part of the risk of trying to do this layer yourself or any layer of infrastructure yourself is like it might be easy to get started with some open source project and some, you know, any cloud provider. But the reality is like assume the best case scenario, which is that your model takes off. Then you end up having to rebuild these things at different scales instead of focusing on continuing to differentiate on what made your model take off in the first place. And essentially, like from our perspective, like we want to solve all of the problems that get in your way of building a business, specifically like for labs, of people building models and distributing models and monetizing them through these APIs, and we just want to take the problem like very full stack and solve it, and it really fits in. Like inference is everything really means that we have to solve all the problems that are required for you to end up with a model that can be served like efficiently and performantly and reliably, so that you could build on top of it.
Yeah, no, that's really exciting, and I think just this expansion for Baseten coming from like the open source world into closed sources is really cool, and that personally gets me really pumped. Okay, great. So hopefully we have lab founders listening to us today. So if you are a model lab founder, and what would you want them to walk away and just remember and understand about like what we're bringing to the market?
Yeah, I think, to a certain extent, like this is our way of going all in on labs. Like we want to become your best friends. Like essentially like,
we already are.
We already are. But the reality is like, I think if you see yourself solving a problem where you're like, hey, I wish someone else had solved this so that I could go back to doing the thing I actually want to do, like, please come talk to us. Like we're at least thinking about it, and we really want to be the place that gives you all the tools so that you could focus on building the things that actually differentiates you. And we have a lot of fun like working with labs, and we just like learning a lot about like what people are doing and where we can help, and we'd love to have that conversation.
Great. Well, thank you so much. So yeah, if you are interested, if that piqued your interest, as I said, we launched the product last week, and you can find like a blog in our blog area on the website, or if you want to read more about the product itself, we have also a landing page. And so yeah, feel free to submit an application, reach out to us. We are friendly. We love talking to labs, as we said, and so we look forward to hearing from you.